Welcome to Marketing Unzipped. I'm Rob Curtis, and this is the start of something I've been itching to create for a while now. We're going to introduce new episodes we're calling The Gods of Marketing. And in this series, we're unzipping the minds of the most legendary marketers, advertisers, and persuaders the world has ever seen. The ones who didn't just run campaigns, but literally wrote the rules on how modern marketing works. And today, we're starting with the big one. The man in the grey flannel suit, the original madman, the Rolls Royce of copywriting. For those of you that don't know, his name is David Ogilvy. Now, if you've been in marketing for even 5 minutes, you've probably heard this name dropped in some dusty marketing manual or tossed around on LinkedIn. But what most people miss is just how relevant and practical and just frankly brilliant Ogilvy's approach still is today, even for small businesses, solo founders, and marketing teams juggling too much with too little. Because you see, Ogilvy wasn't interested in fluff. He wasn't trying to win awards. He just believed in one thing: selling. And not in a sleazy, pushy way, in a deeply thoughtful, highly strategic, customer-first way. He understood people. He respected the reader, and he worked relentlessly to communicate value in a way that cut through noise and made people just want to buy. So we're diving into this whole world of David Ogilvy, not to glorify the past, but to steal the playbook. We'll talk about where he came from, what made his ads so ridiculously effective, and how you, whether you're a freelancer, a growing brand, or leading a team of marketers, can apply these timeless principles to get better results. No jargon, no fluff, just practical, proven insight from a man who once said, if it doesn't sell, it isn't creative. So before we break down Ogilvy's strategies, let's just zoom out a little bit. Because the man himself, he wasn't your typical ad exec. He didn't come from a marketing degree or some glamorous agency background. In fact, his career path looked more like a winding county road than a straight line to Madison Avenue. David Ogilvy was actually born here in the UK, the son of a classic scholar and a Gaelic-speaking Highlander. That alone's quite a cocktail of influence, to say the least. He studied at Oxford, but dropped out, and then came a string of wildly different jobs. A chef in Paris. He sold Arga cookers door to door. Apparently, he was so good at this, his employer asked him to write a guide for other salesmen. The sales manual, that became the stuff of legends. And even later, he served in British intelligence during the Second World War. And at one point, he even ran a farm in Pennsylvania. It's hardly the normal path to ad agency fame, right? But all of that life experience shaped him. Because Ogilvy wasn't just a writer, he was a student of people. He soaked up knowledge, observed human behavior, and constantly asked, why do people say yes? What persuades them? What holds their attention? By the time he founded Ogilvy and Mather in 1948, he was almost 40 at that time. He was crystal clear on what kind of agency he wanted to build. No guesswork, no fluff. He believed advertising should be based on research, results, and respect for the customer. He's been quoted as saying, advertising people who ignore research are as dangerous as generals who ignore decodes of enemy signals. So in today's terms, you don't run into a battlefield with a hunch. You study, you prepare, and you speak with clarity. And when you look at the ads he created, from Rolls-Royce to Hathaway shirts, they weren't loud, they weren't trendy, they were precise, they were crafted. They were strategic stories designed to sell. Here's the funny thing though, Ogilvy didn't consider himself a creative genius. He actually believed creativity was secondary to research and structure. His aim wasn't to entertain, it was to communicate value so clearly, so directly, that the reader couldn't help but act. Which is why, even though he built one of the most influential agencies in history, his philosophy was just remarkably simple. We sell, or else. So let's start with Ogilvy's, probably his most famous line, and probably the most misunderstood in all of advertising. The customer is not your moron, she's your wife. Before we get into it, that language hasn't aged perfectly well, but in Ogilvy's era, the stereotype was the housewife. If you look past that and zoom in on the meaning, this quote is pure gold. What Ogilvy's clearly saying is, your customer is not stupid. They're not clueless. And they definitely don't need you talking down to them like they're 3 mistakes away from being tricked into a purchase. He believed this so strongly, he built an entire ethos around it. Ogilvy respected the reader. In fact, he called them the most intelligent person in the room. And that was revolutionary at the time. Because back then, ads were often condescending, full of exaggerated promises, or just plain manipulative. Does that sound familiar? I'm sure you've seen a few of those ads. I know I have. Because let's be honest, a lot of modern marketing still makes this mistake. Take a look at half the landing pages you see. They just treat people like goldfish. Endless exclamation marks, massive red arrows, pop-up yelling, "Wait, don't go." It's marketing written for panic, not people. And what Ogilvy did, he said no to all that. He trusted that if you gave the reader genuine value, clear information, and a respectful tone, they'd reward you with attention and possibly a sale. So let's take a practical example of this. Imagine you run a fitness business, you've got a program to sell, and you write a headline like, "Transform your body in just 7 days." That's the kind of overhyped, overpromised copy that assumes your reader has no critical thinking skills. But if you treated the reader with more respect, you might say, "Designed for busy professionals, this 30-minute daily routine helps you build momentum, not just muscle. It's calmer, it's more specific, it trusts the reader to be discerning, and in turn, it makes your brand feel far more credible." Same goes for e-commerce. Service-based businesses, SaaS companies, it doesn't matter what you're selling. If your copy assumes intelligence, you build trust. If it assumes ignorance, you lose it. The magical part of this is when you respect your audience, they start respecting you. And that's not just good marketing. That's the foundation of loyalty. So next time you're writing anything, a product description, a social post, a sales email, ask yourself, am I talking to my audience like they're smart? Would I say this to my friend or my partner? Or am I relying on tricks because I'm afraid the truth won't convert? Because if your copy only works when you exaggerate, it's not strong copy. It's a crutch. And Ogilvy would have called that out in a heartbeat. And it's wild how many businesses spend hours perfecting their product, tweaking landing pages, optimizing their funnel, and then slap a headline like it's an absolute afterthought. Because headlines are 80% of the work. That sort of attitude, Ogilvy would have simply flipped his typewriter. He believed headlines weren't just the entry point to your message, they were the message. He once said, "When you have written your headline, you have spent 80 cents of your dollar." And in today's world, that easily translates to this. If you don't get the right headline, nothing else matters. Your perfect body copy, irrelevant. Your slick design, wasted. If the headline doesn't stop them, they're gone. And he backed this up with data. He knew long before anyone was measuring scroll depth or click-through rates that the majority of people would only ever see the headline. So it had to do one thing, earn attention, but not with gimmicks, not with spammy tricks, but with relevance, with clarity, with a precise understanding of what the customer actually cares about. Let's take a look at his famous Rolls-Royce ad. He could have gone with the simply flashy thing like the world's most luxurious car. Instead, he wrote, "At 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock." That's not just clever, it's beautifully crafted. And it speaks to the customer's unspoken desire for refinement, silence, and engineering excellence. It says something meaningful without shouting. And more importantly, it makes you want to read the next line. And that's the entire job of the headline. Get the first sentence read. And here's where this gets practical. So you run a local service business, a law firm, dentist, a plumber. You've got a homepage that says, "Welcome to ABC Services. Trusted professionals since 1998. Zero tension, zero benefit." That's a hugely missed opportunity. Now imagine replacing that with, "We help Wiltshire's homeowners fix their biggest electrical issues before they turn into disasters." Suddenly, it's not just a headline. It's a promise, it's relevant, and it opens a loop that makes someone want to keep reading. And that's what Ogilvy understood. A great headline isn't just a label, it's the first yes. So before you publish your next piece of content, whether it's a blog, an ad, an email, a landing page, ask yourself these 3. Would I stop scrolling for this? Is it specific enough to feel real? Is it interesting enough to earn a second of attention in a world where everyone's got half a second to spare? Because if the headline flops, The rest might as well not exist. And that's 80% of your effort gone before it even had a chance. Another lesson: research beats guesswork. And I've touched on this slightly already, but most marketers today are drowning in tools, dashboards, and data, but somehow still rely on just gut instinct when it comes to messaging. Ogilvy would have called that out immediately. He didn't guess, he studied. Before he ever wrote a word of copy, he immersed himself in the product. And I don't mean reading a 2-line brief. I mean reading technical manuals, visiting factories, speaking to engineers, even using the product himself. He believed the best copy comes from deep product knowledge, not from creativity alone. And that's the mistake so many businesses still make. They sit in a room trying to come up with clever ideas before they've even asked what actually matters to their customer. There's a story about Ogilvy writing a copy for a cooking stove, one of his earliest jobs. Instead of writing the generic fluff about heating your home, he studied the product so thoroughly that he uncovered a single detail. The stove could burn for 8 hours without refueling. That detail became the hook. And obviously it worked because it was real. It was valuable. And it was the kind of insight no customer would know unless you told them. And this lesson gets lost in the rush to automate, to optimize, to move fast. But speed without understanding is just guessing on repeat. If you're writing a sales page and you haven't spoken to your customers, you're guessing. If you're launching a campaign based on what competitors are doing, you're guessing. If your product messaging is built around what you think is cool, you're definitely guessing. Ogilvy flipped that on its head. He made research the starting point. And when you do that, everything else gets easier. Your headlines become more relevant, your benefits become sharper, your copy resonates because it's rooted in something deeper, far, far deeper than assumption. And the best bit about it is you don't need a research department or a big budget to do this. If you're a solo founder, send a survey to your 10 last customers. If you run a team, do 3 live customer interviews next week. If you're selling software, watch people use it, see where they get stuck, where they light up. Those insights become your creative ammunition. Because as Ogilvy would say, the more you tell, the more you sell. But only if what you're telling them is actually true, useful, and relevant. Lesson number 4, be clear, not cute. And there's a funny thing that happens in marketing teams, especially when creative people get in a room together. Someone will throw out a pun, someone else will crack a clever tagline, and before you know it, everyone's laughing and nodding and thinking, yeah, that sounds cool. But sounding cool doesn't mean your message is clear. And if there's one thing Ogilvy couldn't stand, it was cleverness that got in the way of clarity. He famously said, if it doesn't sell, it isn't creative. Not if it's not witty, not if it doesn't win an award. If it doesn't sell. That was the bar. And to sell, you have to say something that customer actually understands and wants. And this is where so many businesses go off the rails. You see it all the time on websites. Bold mission statements like reimagining the future of connected experiences. What does that even mean? A phone, a software tool, a spiritual retreat? Ogilvy would have scrapped that in seconds. And instead he'd ask, what does the product actually do? What's the benefit? How do we say that in the clearest, most honest way possible? And that, for me, the key word, honest. Because clarity is about trust. When you're specific, when you use plain language, people believe you. Hot time, Google, David Ogilvy's Dove soap ad. Instead of claiming it was magical or revolutionary, he said this: Dove creams your skin while you wash. Simple, visual, and true. And it worked. It helped turn Dove into a billion-dollar brand. Here's where this becomes dangerous in modern marketing, because we're surrounded by examples of vague, bloated copy. We see slogans that sound big but say nothing, and we assume that's how marketing should sound. But it's not. It should sound like this. We help accountants save 5 hours a week by automating client onboarding. We build wardrobe systems that double your storage without touching your floor plan. We turn your Google Analytics data into plain English insights your team can act on. That's not boring. That's really clear. And in a world that is just pumped with noise, clarity is a competitive advantage. So if you ever find yourself publishing copy that sounds good but doesn't say anything, go back and ask, could a stranger understand this in 5 seconds? Would a customer feel like I'm speaking to them? Am I trying to be clever or trying to be useful? Because Ogilvy knew something too many marketers forget. You don't need to impress people, you need to help them decide. So let's bring all of this right back down to earth, because it's one thing to admire Ogilvy's genius, but what does that actually mean for the rest of us? What can you take from a mid-century ad man and use in your business today? And the answer is, it's a hell of a lot more than you think. So let's start small. You're a small business owner. Maybe you're running a online shop, doing some freelance work, offering a local service. You might be thinking, of course, I'm not Rolls-Royce or Dove. I don't have an agency. I don't even have a marketing team. And that's fine. In fact, it might be your biggest advantage because Ogilvy's rules do not require scale. They require discipline, clarity over cleverness, benefits over buzzwords, and above all else, respect for your audience. So maybe your version of Ogilvy looks like this. You rewrite your homepage headline to focus on a real customer outcome, not a vague promise. You stop trying to be innovated in your copy and instead try to be understood. You pick up the phone, you call 5 customers and you ask, what made you choose us? And then you build your next ad around that answer. That's Ogilvy in practice. Now, let's say you're working inside a company. Maybe you've got a marketing budget, a few team members, and a bunch of competing priorities. Here's where we can think like Ogilvy and maybe clean up your mess. Use his headline rule to improve your email open rates. Apply his research-first approach before your next campaign. Ditch the jargon in your landing pages and replace it with plain English that actually explains what you do. And if you're part of a leadership team running marketing for a growing brand, Ogilvy's real legacy is this. He didn't build ads, he built platforms. His campaigns weren't one-off stunts. They were part of a consistent, clear positioning strategy. Whether it was Duff, Berkshire Hathaway, American Express, he helped each brand find a voice that could scale because it was anchored in truth. And in a world where brands pivot every quarter, that kind of consistency is rare and so, so powerful. So if there's one takeaway for every business, is this. Don't write for clicks. Don't write for trends. Write for people. Know what you're selling. Know who it's for. Say it clearly. And if it doesn't help them say yes, don't say it at all. Ogilvy's not just for ad nerds and copy geeks. He's an absolute blueprint for anyone who's tired of shouting and ready to start connecting. So by now, your brain's probably awash with all these incredible ideas that in classic Ogilvy fashion, let's boil it all down. A no fluff version of his playbook. The kind you could pin on your office wall or slap on a sticky note by your desk. Number 1, speak human. Ditch the buzzwords, stop trying to sound clever. Write the way you'd actually talk to someone sitting across the table. Someone who actually matters to your business. Number 2, test, don't guess. Ogilvy didn't throw spaghetti at the wall. He tested headlines. He ran split ads. He researched relentlessly. If you're launching without learning first, you're running blind. And number 3, be specific. Fast, affordable, easy. They're all meaningless unless you anchor them in. Replace high quality with how it's high quality. Replace innovative with what's actually different. The details sell. Number 4, sell the benefit, not the product. We all know this. But no one wants a mattress. They want better sleep. No one wants analytic software. They want answers. Ogilvy made the benefit feel real. That's what pulled people in. And the final rule, respect your audience. They're not gullible. They're not bored. They're not looking to be manipulated. They're looking to be helped. The moment you treat them like equals is the moment you start winning their trust. You don't need an agency. You don't need a massive team. You just need to give a damn about what you're saying and who you're saying it to. And that, for me, is the real legacy Ogilvy left behind. Not just the beautiful ads, not just the big clients, but a standard, a higher bar for what marketing should be. And that's it. Our first lesson from the marketing gods, David Ogilvy. A man who didn't just write ads, but wrote the playbook for how we communicate, persuade, and sell with integrity. There's one thing I hope you take away from this episode, is that marketing doesn't need to be louder. It needs to be clearer, more human, and more honest. And that's what Ogilvy did better than anyone. It's exactly what your business can do right now, whether you're selling software, services, side hustles. Before you go, I've got one small ask. If this episode sparked something for you, made you rethink your copy, or gave you even one practical idea you want to try, share it with a person who hasn't listened to Marketing Unzipped yet. And that's it. One friend, one colleague, a fellow founder who could use a bit of Ogilvy in their life. Because the more people we reach, the more this podcast becomes a place for practical, real-world marketing wisdom and not just noise. Thanks for listening. I'm Rob Curtis, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Marketing Unzipped.